Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we've got the great Dave Birkett back again to talk about the NFL draft. You had to miss the NFL draft, but I'm sure you kept an eye on it from afar. I know you've already written about it. Since the draft happened, you wrote that there's potentially a controversy with the quarterbacks. I think you're just trying to will that into existence. That's why you wrote it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
More than that, I just want to be sure before we start, is this the real Dave Birkett or is this the chat robot AI Dave Birkett, who now is apparently outsourcing his columns and his mailbags to Chat GPT, right?
Well, I was just taking a page out of your workbook there, trying to have someone else do my work for me. So,
I love it.
I was goofing around on AI the other day. And,
Dave, let's tell the truth here, Dave, for a sec. So you and I were in Allen Park for a few days, and
that's right. It's good times.
And at one point, we talked about how we missed having Carlos there, and we did, and it didn't feel the same. But I did think at one point, Dave, God, I wonder what kind of what he'd be trying to stir up, what kind of false angle he'd be trying to take if he were here. And the only thing I could think about was, Hendon Hooker should be the starter. He didn't quite go that far, but
it's early.
He's a long way to go, Shawn.
Hooker can't even walk right now because of his knee. So
maybe that's the only reason he didn't. But in any case, yeah. What's your biggest takeaway? I know Carlos has got a lot of questions. What's your biggest takeaway from what Brad Holmes and company just pulled off during the draft?
So look, the last couple of days, anytime I run into someone, they've sort of asked me the same question, and this is the general answer that I've given them.
Sorry to be so unoriginal.
Yeah, no, I like the players a lot. I think they got 4 guys that will help them in some, way, shape, form, or fashion this year. So I like the players, but I don't think they got great value with their 2 first-round picks. That's just how it is in the NFL. The running back and linebacker positions are not that valued. And Brad, he said a couple times this weekend, it doesn't match up with the mock drafts. And I know people are going to, it has nothing to do with matching up with the mock drafts. It has to do with the positional value and just the way linebackers and running backs are viewed in the NFL. And I am not someone who says never draft a running back early. I think Gibbs is a good player. I think he'll fit them. Same thing with Jack Campbell. He should be a starter. But I do think you at least have to acknowledge that the value of running backs in today's game and the value of inside linebackers, and we can just look at this past week and what's going on in the NFL. Patrick Queen, the Ravens don't pick up his option. Jordan Brooks, the Seahawks don't pick up his option. And I know there's other circumstances there. But first round linebackers, they don't have their option picked up. Roquan Smith, obviously the Ravens paid him instead of Patrick Queen. Roquan Smith, when the Bears traded him to the Ravens, the best linebacker in the NFL, they traded him for a 2nd and 5th round pick. So you're telling me that, as good as Jack Campbell is, if he becomes Roquan Smith, that's the type of guy that you keep. Or even if you don't keep him, then you're going to get a 2 and a 5 for him. And so, that's the value of the position. Good player, will help the Lions this year. The Lions are in win now mode. I understand why they sort of made these moves that they did. Couple that with it not being a great draft overall in terms of talent. I think the Lions got 4 good players who will help them, but we can't ignore the value of where they were picked.
So are we not sure that John Fox basically said we got to draft Brian Urlacher? Is that what he was kind of getting at? Is why they brought him in?
I mean,
we got our Mike Ditka. No, not Mike Ditka. Dick Butkus.
No, but and then this is the other thing too. And look, I'm we're talking about this, and I'm sort of, it sounds like I'm don't like the draft. I do. I gave him a B. I thought, again, that they've got some really 4 good players at the top, and then Hendon Hooker is a worthwhile, lottery ticket to take.
Scratcher. You called him a scratcher.
Scratch off. That's right. I mean, maybe he hits. Who knows? I don't, it's a long way off to find out if he does, but no, look, Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone should be your starting linebackers this fall. And, we talk about all the youth that they have on defense, and they had these 5 rookies playing big roles for them. And Malcolm Rodriguez is not going to be out of the rotation by any means, but, now he's not a starter anymore. So, and that's how life is in the NFL. But, when you're talking about growth and getting more from last year's group, and, Rodriguez was one of those guys I would have thought he'd be counting on to take another step forward. And maybe he still does, but now he's going to be blocked on the depth chart by Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell.
And let's just tell the truth here. Let's just be real. Dave gave, in his column that ran a day or two ago, he gave Brad Holmes' draft a B. And Dave and Brad Holmes are BFFs. They're driving buddies, lunch buddies. They, little pillow talk before the draft. For Dave to give Brad Holmes a B, it's really in the real world a C, right?
No.
There's an extra value added there because you're BFF.
No, I think if we're being honest about this, okay, and you know this, Carlos, that if you go back and look at the draft grades I've given out for about the last 10 years, they're probably all Bs. Or somewhere right around there.
Probably,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've got to tell our boss to double check this, you're pulling.
But it's not. I've said this a million times, and I still get emails that are like, "Well, you don't like this guy," or this guy sucks. It's not about the player, what that player is going to become, because I don't know what the player is going to become, right? And I realize that Brad and his staff have put in thousands of more hours studying these guys than me, right? They know the value of the talent. I like the talent. To me, when I'm grading people on these drafts, it's the use of the resources.
Right.
And so
absolutely.
I don't know, maybe they couldn't have got Gibbs at 18. Talking to his high school coach was saying, we thought he'd be, 23, 25. Really, Gibbs didn't have a lot of people over because he thought he was going day 2. So, whatever, as much as people say maybe he was going to go 14 or 15, I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have been there at 18. Regardless, the resources that you use to draft the running back at 12, I don't know, the way the game is, it's just, I understand. I don't know that the value is there for that. The flip side, I thought Brad did an excellent job on day 2, moving around the board, picking up extra picks, bouncing up, going to get his guy when he needed it. So I thought he was masterful, making trades on day 2. And I didn't quite like the value as much on day 1.
The only thing I would counter with a little bit is just this idea of value. So, and how we think it think of it in a philosophical sense. And I understand your point about Smith and Chicago and getting a second round or 5th rounder for him. But that's what he was valued at the time for that particular team. So I don't know if Jack Campbell's going to be any good or not. Just like you said, or Gibbs. But Holmes also said, aside from saying, hey, just because somebody mocks it up, I'm willing to take the heat because we don't align with the mock. The real point to me, what he said over the weekend is, this isn't a running back. I mean, yeah, he runs the ball, but he's a slot receiver. He's running wheel routes out of the backfield, right? I mean, he's a receiver. We don't know where we're going to put him. More importantly, you don't know where we're going to put him and what's going to happen. He's going to be out there with Montgomery. As far as Campbell, to his point, again, we don't know if this will work or not, but what they're thinking is he's not just a middle linebacker or off-ball linebacker. He's going to connect the front and the back of the defense in a way they do not have. And if he can diagnose something and get to somebody a yard short on 3rd and 7 in a way that Rodriguez couldn't, because he couldn't sniff it out, and you force a punt, and that forced punt leads to a win, and that win leads to a different spot in the playoffs, then how do you assign value to that?
Shawn, when Holmes said that he's a slot running back, I'm sure you stepped up and reminded him that the Lions drafted Theo Riddick in the 6th round, right? That they could have had a slot receiver and a running back hybrid guy in the 6th round, right? So
yeah,
much later than the 1st round.
I was thinking about how he led Alabama in receiving yards or catches or whatever it was, how the way they used him at Alabama. And one of the most explosive offense because Georgia was probably better balanced than Alabama last year. That's why so many defensive guys went. But from that school, I watched Alabama play. I watched that guy scoot around. He's just different. He's not. I don't know if it will work at all, but I don't think putting a label, a linebacker and a running back on him is in a traditional way captures what they both potentially may be in terms of value. We'll have to see. But how do you put a value on getting a couple of guys that could win them games next year and get into the playoffs?
Well, I mean, I agree with you on. No, I agree with you on some level, right? I mean, obviously it is about the player, but
in a poor draft, by the way.
Like the player wasn't just about drafting a right tackle with Penei Sewell. It was about drafting a guy that you thought was going to be an elite tackle for years to come. So that's the case with whatever position you pick at whatever spot in the draft. I mean, Brad says he doesn't draft with a depth chart, right? So he's never just drafting a running back or a linebacker or whatever. So it doesn't matter what position that is or where that is. Look, those guys should help the Lions. I think Gibbs will be a dynamic player for them. Ultimately, he's going to play 70% of the snaps, maybe at most this year, right? He's going to get 20 touches a game. And, that's the, I mean, I don't even know if he's going to play 70%. That's a lot of snaps, right?
Yeah, that is a lot.
But if he's splitting time with David Montgomery, maybe playing a little bit alongside him, just look, the analytics of it, right? And this is, Brad talks about, right, I've always got to have the future in mind. Well, the future in mind is taking into account positional value and what all that means for your team, because it's great. And I was of the belief like, hey, man, draft Bijan Robinson in round 1. So I'm not saying Gibbs is not worth that sort of pick, but I'm just saying that the value of that position, the amount, if you hit on a running back in the first round, right, the amount of cap space that you save, the amount of dollars that you save between that and a good running back that's on a veteran contract is significantly less than if you hit on that of a pass rusher or an offensive tackle or whoever it is versus that of a player of the same caliber as a vet. So then you extrapolate that, right? The money that you save there can be used to improve other areas of your team. There's just a lot that goes into, the analytics of why you don't take those positions in the first round. And I'm not saying never do that. I'm not saying I even, I don't totally disagree with their picks. I'm just saying when I take into account, when I grade these picks and using, it's about the value of what they did with that pick. And so for me, drafting a running back and a linebacker, doing both of those in round 1, it just wasn't, the value wasn't there for me.
Real quickly, Carl, sorry. I understand a little bit more with Campbell and the linebacker, because they're trying to talk about, they're talking about intangible things. I mean, obviously the guy, he's a very good athlete, but they're looking at our secondary stunk, our defensive line was young, and we want something to sort of connect all that. So they're valuing something that's hard to put metrics on. But again, I don't think it's fair to call Gibbs a running back. If he's not going to be Tyreek Hill, but if they get an athlete, a playmaker who's going to be able to do all this sorts of stuff, then how do you even label him? And I mean, I would argue you're right more if they'd gone after Robinson.
He should be Tyreek Hill if you take him at 12. So
right, no, or something a little bit in that direction, right? I mean, that's what they're banking on. Who knows if it'll work, but that's why they did it. To me, I would have been more critical if they'd taken Robinson, because he's just a little better version of Montgomery. He's not going to stretch the field in a different way like this guy could potentially do.
Well, that's what Brad had said. And I talked to Tashard Choice, who was the running backs coach for both Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. And look, he said, sort of asked him, right, who was better, or kind of to compare the two. And that's exactly what he said. He said, look, they are different. It's whatever your team needs. Bijan is a bell cow. Bijan has, game or tackle breaking ability, unlike, anyone that he's seen. Gibbs has the game breaking speed, to make plays. They're both really good receivers. So he said, when scouts would ask him about this, that's what he would tell them. Well, it's really, what's your team looking for in a position? So I think to your point, Shawn, Gibbs is a fit for the Lions because you can pair him with David Montgomery, right? He's not going to be that guy that you're going to put out there for 22 carries and then throw him 5 passes. Like, he wouldn't hold up, to that sort of pounding in the NFL. So he adds a lot of value to the Lions. And it will be interesting to see how they use him, right? If it's him and Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams, if that's the group that's on the field, the skill group, like all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's some speed on the field, and Amon-Ra's a really good player, and how do you line these guys up? How do you deploy them? But he's also going to be a rookie. So we'll see exactly how much they put on his plate and they ask him to do in the various roles that he could play.
Thanks for benching Marvin Jones, by the way. It's a good move.
Marvin will be in the mix too. I'm just saying, when you got your best five out there late in the season, you're looking for someone to make some plays right for the offense to make a difference. Jameer should be playing at that point in time, and you'd expect that Jameson by that point would be back and be a big play contributor for them too.
Do you think it made any little bit of an impact or a little bit of a impacted their decision just a little bit that J-Mo's going to miss the first 6 games, that we got to get somebody, make sure we have another pass catcher in the backfield there or available in the slot?
Not at 12. I mean, that's a pick that you're making for 4 or 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, whatever it may be. Running back, probably you're making for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't think just because you're missing 6 games with Jameson that you are making that's altering your decision on who you're going to take at that point in time. So, I think they had to factor all that in, Jameson's suspension, to their draft strategy, right? You needed someone to help fill his loss, but I think they loved Gibbs irrespective of that and were, looking to take him high even before the suspension came about.
By the way, that listener, that sound of
that's right. I was trying to mute
kitchens,
it right there.
The dishes, that sound in the background is Dave's lovely family. I assume the kids just got home, but no, that's just ambiance, right, Carlos?
My wife took Jack. Jack has his first communion Saturday, so she took him to get his hair cut. So they just came back and came in the door, and so that's the background noise that you hear.
Do you think God cares? Do you think God cares if we cut our hair?
Probably not, but I think when you look back on the pictures years from now, right, you probably are like, man, look at my hair. Why didn't I get a haircut then? Or look how I was rocking the fade back then.
Sean doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
Maybe he wants to look good for the second grade girls. He wants to show off a little bit.
Yeah, I love looking back.
Not
at
you, my son. That is.
Hair. No, I knew who you meant. Yeah, no, I knew you meant. We're going to have to erase this whole podcast. Right. Yeah. No, I love looking back at myself when I was a little tyke with some hair. I mean, Carl's has been blessed with a nice head of hair all his life, but not all of us have been.
I've got mine cut right now, but sometimes you just got to grow the lettuce out, right? At this stage, just show people you can, Carlos, right? I mean,
that's right. It's a flex.
Sean, right? Yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, I would if I could. I mean, I guess, right? Yeah. I used to have Rick Ocasek hair. It's not that I want to date this podcast any more than we already have.
But, I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, he was the lead singer of the Cars, and he had sort of a mullety top, short, spiky in the front. Mine's never a spiky, but long in the back. It wasn't quite a mullet, but it was just, an 80s dude with a flannel shirt. And you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, that was that was me back then. All right. Let's pick through when we take a break. Let's take a break and let's pick through when we get back a little bit of just the offenses versus defensive philosophy, and did you think they went after defense enough? I know Carlos has some thoughts on that, and we'll get back more. We'll get back here in a quick sec with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, you've got some thoughts on. I don't know how strong of thoughts they are. Maybe they're just more questions, right? You're curious. Did if the Lions were aggressive enough in going after defensive players in the draft, and we want to get Dave's thoughts here. But am I putting words in your mouth, or is that inaccurate?
No, you know what? It was interesting because I was watching the draft from afar, and watching it from afar, you get more of a sense of what the fan reaction is to all this, because when you're there in Allen Park in the fog of war and the weeds and the picture coming fast and furious and trades and all, you don't pay attention to that as much. But reading it like a fan away, people hated these picks. They hated the running back pick, and they really hated the Jack Campbell pick. And I think Dave got to it, and I think everybody assumed that they were going to, considering how bad their defense was, and as you pointed out correctly, Shawn, their defense did improve. in the second half of the season, the last 10 games. But it still needs help, even after free agency. Dave is showing us on our camera his son Jack's haircut, so he looks like a mini me, unfortunately.
That's true.
I'm probably better looking, but and smarter, but he looks like a mini me.
Ouch, that one hurts.
But Dave pointed out in this column how they had the chance to draft guys like Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson at 6, and they didn't. And I think that's what people were expecting. I thought they would do that. I thought they would use their first pick on one of these more elite, higher value guys, right? Defensive linemen, edge rushers, that kind of thing. Defensive tackle. There's still a lot of questions there. To me, it seems like, a slot receiver, running back, hybrid, scat back guy, whatever, at 12 is kind of a luxury. And Jack Campbell, nobody's ever heard of this guy. And he's the 18th pick. I mean, it's like, that's kind of nutty.
Wait. You can't say no one's ever heard of the best linebacker in the Big Ten.
Don't even. I don't even know what to say to that, Dave. Dave, I don't know what to say to that. I really don't. But you see,
nationally, people have heard of Jack Campbell.
He was
still around here know about him. Yeah,
even if you didn't think he was the best linebacker in the draft, like it was a very small group of 3 linebackers up there, and he was widely considered one of them. He was a really good player this year. So.
Well, he can be great for the 85 Bears then, I suppose. But that was a good pick. Their first defensive player they take.
Do you see
a traditional off the ball linebacker?
Dave, do you see what my Wednesdays are like? I mean, seriously.
Did you like the pick?
Listen, I'm going to play both sides of this, right? Because now I feel bad that I was like arguing with Shawn a little bit about the value of these positions in round 1, because it's true, the value. But the players themselves are really good players, and that includes Jack Campbell. Like, he was a really good player for Iowa. Iowa had a pretty darn good defense this year, right? And he was the best player on that defense. It wasn't Lucas Van Ness, another first-round pick. It was him. It wasn't Kayvon Merriweather, safety from Detroit here, who got drafted as well. It was Jack Campbell. Jack's a really good player. So I like the player, but the use of the resource, I don't know. After Jack Campbell went 18, the next inside linebacker, off the ball linebacker, went in the 3rd round. So that's where my dislike of the pick comes in, not with the player itself. I think he's a good player. To your point, Carlos, about the Lions maybe should have having to draft more defense. Ultimately, this draft will be judged by they passed on Jalen Carter at 6, and I don't think they should have taken him. He wasn't the right fit for them. But if he's Randy Moss, right? If they pass on Randy Moss for Terry Fair, then that will always be remembered. If same thing, if Tyree Wilson and maybe he had the medical issues that dropped him down some boards. If he becomes a really good player, it's the same concept. Like, wow, you could have had Hutch and Wilson on the end. So this draft will always be. The players that the Lions pick will always be compared to those guys. But as I went into the draft after that Jameson suspension, I thought that as you looked at what the Lions had and didn't have on their offensive side of the ball, they looked a little thin at receiver without Jameson, and they didn't really have a proven tight end. And so there were a lot of, there were and maybe still are some questions on offense. And as bright as I think Ben Johnson is and as good as this offense was last year, I think, it was wise to replenish, some of the skill positions that they had on that side of the ball to make sure that they stay one of the best offenses in the NFL.
It's talking about making a strength even stronger, right? I mean, that makes
exactly.
Sense.
That's part of it.
But I think everybody saw this defense enough, and there are going to be big questions, still about this defense. I don't know. I mean, it's, and I don't know. I mean, I think we've talked about this before, but the politics of Ben Johnson coming back and staying back, and hey, man, we're not gonna, we're gonna give you what you need or what you want or whatever. I mean, they definitely had a focus on offense. I'm sure Ben Johnson had a say in who he preferred and who he liked and how he could use them. So that should be that you can understand why that would work, right? I mean, let's continue to be good doing what we've been good doing. That's our strength of our team. Let's make sure we don't drop off, and especially when you lose Jamal Williams, and then obviously DeAndre Swift was not going to be in the plans. So they could have also just kept TJ Hawkinson, but whatever. So you're creating problems sometimes for yourself, but they're making sure that they don't have holes and deficiencies, so it makes sense. But on defense, who's inspired right now about what's happening on that defense?
There was an article in the Ringer, and I forget who wrote it, so I apologize, but he said essentially what you're saying, that you traded Laporta for Hawkinson, basically, and you traded Swift for Gibbs. And so where are the Lions better offensively? They're the same. They're younger, but they're the same as they were. And I get that line of thinking. But, look, DeAndre Swift played sparingly because of injuries, right? He couldn't stay on the field. Gibbs, younger, more dynamic at this point, you would think. I think that's an upgrade. Hawkinson, better tight end than Laporta right now, but the Lions certainly like his receiving upside and the dimension that he can bring split out from that line. So, I think it's sort of like Brad had said when they drafted Panay, and he even repeated it this year, right? That sometimes it's, you want to feed the beast, right? If you have something really good going, you want to make it stronger. You want to make sure that it doesn't slack off. And I do think that's part of it with this offense, is that, hey, part of our identity right now is this really dynamic offense that can do a lot of things. We can run the ball well. We're really good at play action. We add these guys who can help us, that tight end. Just think of how you use tight ends, right? Fakes a block. He's going out in the flat and he's catching a pass that he turns into a 20-yard gain, right? Same thing with Gibbs, the speed and the playmaking ability that he has and how that fits into, some of this play action game that they have. I do think the Lions were conscious of making sure that they keep, the main thing and keep that offense humming.
Well, so a counterpoint to and I saw the article in the Ringer. And I understand the thinking, but it's a little more. There's more nuance to it, and some of it's not nuance. It's right there in black and white. They didn't trade Swift for Gibbs. They traded Swift for Gibbs and Laporta, right? In essence, you move from 6 to 12, you get the extra pick, and so not only that, Hawkinson for Laporta, they were going to have to pay Hawkinson to keep him after this year, and
money's a factor there.
So probably a decent amount. So now they got him they got both the guys on a rookie deal, but especially you got Laporta on a rookie deal. And if he is just as productive as Hawkinson, we don't know if he will be. If he is, let's say they make a run and they get into the playoffs and win a game or lose their first game or whatever. And okay, that's a successful season. Now we need to go out and spend more money. Well, we've got production at the tight end and however many extra millions of dollars now against the salary cap. So to me, there's a little bit of roster building in terms of financial stuff too. Not only did they get faster with both those positions, they upgraded the speed at the running back and the slot, whatever, and the tight end. They're going to save some money. So if they say, okay, hey, we do need another edge. It's hard to get really good edge guys, but another tackle, whatever. We need to replenish because some of the backfield guys defensive backfield guys we just got are on short-term deals, and we want to do some more there. Then we have the flexibility to do there. So to me, they're thinking short-term and long-term with what they just did.
Well, yeah, and I mean Branch would be the natural, player that takes over for CJ Gardner-Johnson, right? So there is some long-term planning there, but that's all the more reason why the positional value comes into play in round one.
If they're good players, they're good players.
Yeah, like TJ Hawkinson, 2-time Pro Bowler. I still don't understand the Hawkinson thing. Like, why not pay him? Why not? He could have helped you last year, and he could help you this year. I mean, like, I don't understand why they needed to get rid of him. I mean, obviously there was something there. Did he not fulfill all of, the requirements that Ben Johnson had? And I don't understand why you let a good player go who's good friends with your quarterback, by the way, and they have good chemistry.
Well, I mean, I think, look, I think the common theory in the NFL, right, is that the way the salary cap is structured, you have the money, the potential to pay, 6 to 8 to 10 guys, right? Like high level contracts based on their position. Just and it depends on what your quarterback is making, right? And if you're quarterback is top of the line and has a huge cap number, you're probably paying, 6 to 8. And if he doesn't, maybe you're paying 8 to 10. And so when you look at the Lions roster, okay, they're paying Decker and Ragnar pretty good contracts. They're going to have to give Sewell a new deal here in a year. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown's another one, right? Defensive end, in theory, you're going to have to pay Hutchinson. I mean, so you start sort of going down the list, right? You want to pay a top cornerback. Let's just take the Lions out of it. A top cornerback, a top defensive end, 1 or 2 linemen, your best receiver, your quarterback. I mean, all of a sudden, there's your 6, 7, 8 guys. And so unless that tight end is the elite of the elite,
Kelce.
Unless that linebacker is the elite of the elite, unless that running back is the elite of the elite, that's part of the reason, again, why this positional value comes into play. And so from the Lions with Hawkinson specifically, I think, the thought was that he was a good player, but he wasn't a great player. And so
2-time Pro Bowler.
Well, one of them was this year.
How many Pro Bowlers do they have on their team?
Okay. I mean, how many people make the Pro Bowl too nowadays, right? So I wouldn't use that as the elite of the elite. He's not Kelce. I mean, that's just the fact. He was a good player, but I don't know that he was a great player. And so I think ultimately, especially where the Lions were at the time, they were 2-6 or whatever they were at the time, right? You make the trade, you get the future assets, you don't have to lock him up. And part of it might have been, hey, man, we knew it was going to be a really good tight end class this year, and we're going to draft one. And they did. And so they got a reasonable facsimile of him, and now we'll find out what he does on the field.
Although Brad Holmes said that it didn't matter what the record was, he was going to trade Hawkinson no matter what.
He did say that, yep.
And we have to believe everything he says. Shawn believes everything he says.
No, I don't know. Until they prove otherwise, right? Until he starts mismanaging this into the ground, I don't know. Right. Yeah.
Well,
deserve the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, I brought this up before, and that Carolina game, they didn't have T.J. Hawkinson for that game, and they lost. That was the game
because they couldn't stop the run.
But they could have used T.J. Hawkinson to score more points.
They could have used
that
Jack
same
Campbell.
Day, T.J. Hawkinson had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Vikings. Could have used that.
So Dave, you need to help me out here again. God,
the defense isn't going to do the job. You got to do more on offense.
I thought I was just going to come here and refute that Hendon Hooker started the quarterback controversy, and then we got into Jack Campbell.
No, we haven't even got to that. I don't want to get to that because it's just going to make my head hurt. But go ahead. What are your thoughts on Carlos semi-trolling with Hendon Hooker? It's like he couldn't wait to get his hands into the draft.
Yeah, he was like, what is, let's see, quarterback controversy. Let's roll with that.
I had been waiting for them to draft. Hey, you guys know that, Stafford and I were BFFs, but still, I was a little critical of him once in a while. So I've been waiting for them to draft a quarterback. And that's why I would give Brad Holmes, tell him next time you talk to him tonight or whatever, tell him I would have given him a B just for drafting Hendon Hooker. So thank you, Brad. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so everyone out there who believes Carlos is, the Lions have a quarterback controversy right now. I just want you to remember, right?
Not right now. It could be this year, but it could be next year. It's going to happen.
That Carlos was the guy who said they should start Jake Rudock over Matthew Stafford. So wanted to see that happen. Look, I like the Hooker pick.
I don't even know what to say to that. I don't even know what to say to that. I'd forgotten that. Why did you put that back in my mind? Why did you have to put that back in my mind?
Jake was a good guy. Goodness. It's probably just because I like Jake more.
Carlos was talking about the Twitter blue check and having some fun with that. And I thought, oh yeah, that's great. You want to, maybe write something kind of like an old Bob, not a Bob Talbot, but an old fashioned kind of humor column. I'm like, yeah, that's the ticket, right? Leave Hendon Hooker to Dave.
All right, Hendon Hooker. Look, good. I mean, had a really good year at Tennessee, right? I mean, before he got injured, he was the leader for the Heisman Trophy. Okay, and I think he was a great value for the Lions in round 3. You don't have a backup. Developmental guy came from an offense in Tennessee that just is not conducive to immediate success in the NFL. So he has a lot to learn. Here's the problem with your theory and other people's theory that Hendon Hooker is the guy that's going to replace Jared Goff. Maybe it happens, but the Lions are going to be pretty good this year, right? Or we think they are. And if they're that good, they're not turning the reins over in 2024 to some young quarterback who's never thrown a meaningful pass in the NFL. He's not going to play in the preseason, just like the Lions did with Jameson Williams last year, in all likelihood. So for the Lions, at some point, they're going to have to make a decision on whether to pay Jared Goff or not, to keep rolling forward with him as their quarterback. And whether that's in the next 2 months, which I wouldn't do that if I was the Lions, whether it's, a year from now, which then you're coming off a playoff appearance, maybe a playoff win. Who knows? If you have any sort of success, you're probably not walking away from Jared Goff at that point in time. So you have to make the decision on Hendon Hooker as being your quarterback of the future, or Jared Goff essentially not being your quarterback of the future, without having Hendon Hooker, without having seen him make a meaningful pass, play a meaningful snap, even in a preseason game, because of where he's at in his recovery from a knee injury. So Hendon Hooker right now is 100% a developmental backup. There's more upside than your typical backup because of who he is and the success that he had. But I think it would be a stretch right now to say that Hendon Hooker is the heir apparent or the next in line, or there's this pending quarterback controversy, because by the time he sees the field for the first time, you're in all likelihood having extended Jared Goff already because of the success that the Lions had this season. If he doesn't have that success, hey, all bets are off. And that's where the lottery ticket comes into play, that, that's a worthwhile gamble because you got somebody with more upside than your typical backup. But if you just think out the, how things play out in the NFL and what could happen this fall, I think there's a high likelihood that the Lions extend Jared Goff before the 2024 season.
How long do you think they would give him? What kind of contract? 3 year, 4 year?
I think you probably, you're talking 4 years, I don't know, $180 million. I mean, $45 million a season. That's just a random, guess. I mean, that's where he's not going to get. And this is the other thing when people talk about, there's this risk in waiting to pay Jared Goff right now. Maybe because the value could always go up. And if the Lions have a really, really good season, he commands more money. But to me, I don't know that. And look, again, just like Brad and those guys know the draft better than us, they know the market of these guys better than us. But I don't see Jared Goff topping Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts or Justin Herbert when it comes to contractual value. And so if Justin Herbert is going to be the low man on that totem pole right there with $50 million annually, to me, Jared Goff's value is going to be less than $50 million, whether he signs that contract now or in the future, a year from now. And so from the Lions standpoint, if you wait a year, you have a little bit more insurance built in that, okay, this wasn't a 1 year thing for Jared Goff. We had success in the second season. We made the playoffs. Now we're willing to spend a little bit of money to give him a contract. And Jared Goff isn't going to sign a deal that's like a 2 year deal. You know what I mean? Like, he's 28 years old. So he's going to get paid, and he should get paid if he has another good season. So the Hooker pick, I like it. I think there's a lot of merit to taking him where they took him and having him as your insurance in case something happens with Jared, and having a good backup and maybe having some trade value down the road. But I only see him as the heir apparent worst case scenario if something, if Jared has a really bad year this year, or if things, don't go according to plan, he gets hurt, whatever the case may be. I really think that's about the only circumstance in which Hendon Hooker becomes the Lions, guy, because if Jared wins, why are you going to go away from him?
Look, we need to take another break, but before we do, I hope we've done a few things here. I think we've made everybody happy. Dave laid out the rational reasons behind the pick and what's actually going to happen, and a couple of possibilities. Carlos got to have his fun, jump back in, and and the listeners benefit, right? So I think that's not so bad, I would say.
The problem with Dave's theory, though, it always sounds great, but he talks in black and white absolutes. Goff's going to have a good year, or he's not going to have. It's going to be gray. It's going to be some good, but some struggles, and he's going to go back to, being the Jared Goff we've seen for a long time. And, it's usually not just immediate, like amazing 17 games of amazingness or 17 games of terribleness. And it's going to be little shades of gray, and he threw weird picks and made some weird decisions. And, and the whole question with that, with Hooker, is how soon do the Lions want to have him out there? Because he's going to be wanting to push. His agent's going to want to push to get him on the field and have him play. You can tell he already wants to do that. So how much do they, basically try to redshirt him or say, no, we need to develop this guy, bring him along, see what he has, start taking over as the scout team guy. And if Goff does struggle, and hey, I hate to say it, but Dave, you're probably going to write something when he's off NFI and he can start practicing and the clock starts and when can he start playing a game, and that's going to be big news. People are going to be excited about a potential dynamic. We've never had a dynamic quarterback like him, with the Lions, and Jared Goff is about as interesting as day-old bread, exciting as a player, So unfortunately, I like Goff. I respect what he's done and everything, but the new shiny thing is always the interesting thing, and fans are excited, I think, about it. But yeah, I mean, the Lions can't control the narrative to a certain extent.
I know, but also take a break.
One last thing is the whole contract extension. It's exactly what Lions fans think. They'll extend them for 2 years. No, it's going to be a 3-4 year deal probably, and I don't think any Lions fans who their last name isn't Goff probably want to see him have a 4-year extension. So that's
real quick before you take this break. I threw a lot of ifs in there because I 100% know that Jared Goff is not guaranteed to have that sort of season. If he does, he's the guy. If he doesn't, that's why you have Hooker, but that's why Hooker's the lotto ticket. Okay. Point two. Hendon Hooker's knee injury was 6-7 weeks before Jamison Williams. 8 weeks. It wasn't quite 2 months, whatever it was, right? It was, the surgery was about 8 weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks, somewhere in that neighborhood. It was end of November. Jamison's was mid-January. So you just back Jamison's timetable up. I know all injuries are different, but you're looking at beginning of October before he's ready. The Lions aren't going to rush him out there in August to play him in preseason games. I would be stunned if they did that. No. I mean, Jamison's doctor last year was like, oh, he's ready. He'll be ready this summer for training camp. Lions were like, no. Long-term view here. We're going to wait till November, get him ready, basically redshirt him, get him a few snaps so he's ready for this year. Hendon Hooker, you can do the redshirt part, but you can't get him a few snaps, really. You got to do that in training camp, and that's probably not going to happen this summer.
Yeah.
Thanks for the logic. With that, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. It's that time of the show. I think we need to start my favorite thing. And we always love it when Dave's here to participate in this. And Dave's can be, I don't know, having his pal bring him a Frosty, for example.
Did that actually happen? I missed
the draft.
You missed it 100%, Carlos. Shawn came. He even asked me, he's like, you want a Frosty? I was like, no, I'm okay. And then he went out and got one anyway.
Did he go out with a cookie to get it the night before? Come back it?
Yeah, I got cookie from that gas station cookie, right?
I got him an oatmeal gas station cookie. Oatmeal raisin gas station cookie.
I was sick for 3 days after, but not going to.
Got to take care of the. Got to take care of the workhorse. Got to take care of the paper's star. And you heard
Golden
it,
Goose.
You just exactly. You heard it. The logic he laid out there, the kindness, the gentle touch he has with Carlos when when Carlos is spewing whatever.
all the butt covering. If this, if that. It could happen, maybe so.
It's great. You heard the subtle way Dave said, and then if that happens in October, Carlos, then you can write your controversial. Just it sounded like a second grade teacher. I thought that was really, really kind. Really, it's a nice soft touch. Mm-hmm. But in any case, who wants to start with my favorite thing?
Carlos can go because I always got to think of one on the fly.
Yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
All right. My favorite thing was last week, even though I missed the draft, and I was thinking about you guys and doing all the heavy lifting. Well, Dave, you were doing the heavy lifting. Shawn was just there. But, Tony Garcia was working hard. You were working hard. Jeff Seidel was working hard. Everybody on the desk. And Shawn was there. So I missed it. It was the first time, I think, since 2005 that I'd missed it. But it reminded me that and my unfortunate LA Kings, who lost to Shawn's Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. As you guys know, I was going through a personal struggle last week. That's why I was, on the bench. But it reminded me of how much, what a nice, respite, sports gives us in our lives from, when we're struggling and with other things. And I couldn't believe how angry I was about the hockey playoffs and how interesting it was to read what you guys were writing and the grades and the analysis, and Dave getting all the free miles by flying out to Kansas City for the draft. I felt so good for him. Unfortunately, I don't think he got a bump. That kind of bumped me out. But it was always, we don't get to experience these big moments enough as sports writers, being a fan anymore. So it was kind of a weird, circumstance to be in. But I really enjoyed all the work you guys did. And Shawn, next year, I think my Kings might finally be good enough to beat your Connor McDavid-led Oilers. We should have done it this year, but as they say in Lions land, there's always next year. So that was my favorite thing.
Carlos, we missed you while you were gone. Glad that you're back. We're always here if you need anything. Shawn, appreciate the work being out there last week, even though Carlos doesn't believe it happened.
The viewers can't see it, but I think he did air quotes when he said work. But go ahead. What was it? Three columns, Shawn? 3 columns?
All the crew. Tony Garcia was out there helping out. Yeah. We definitely appreciate that. Three
columns in 3 days. Maybe one day you'll do that. I don't know if you ever will. But
3 columns. Dave.
Go ahead.
3 columns
Sorry,
in 3 days.
Yeah. I was just going to say my favorite thing, and this is very broad, but just perspective, man. Like, I went out to lunch with my friend Brian Hedger the other day. Carlos, I think you know Brian covers the Columbus Blue Jackets. We went to college together a long, long time ago. He was up here moving his daughter out of the dorm at Michigan State for her freshman year. And Carlos, you just went through something similar with your daughters, just finished up their freshman year. And man, it just hit me, A, how old I am, B, how much we have to enjoy, the time that we have with our kids and, the people that are close to us, because how fast it flies by. And I am not anywhere near there yet. My daughter she's going to high school next year. She went and took the placement tests for her high school to figure out what classes, she'll have the other day. My son's 2nd grade, but just kind of talking with Hedge, sitting down for breakfast as we're sitting here talking, thinking about you being in the same spot, Carlos. It's just, everyone should appreciate, man, the time that they have with their kids and those close to them, because it flies. And it goes without saying that, I'm sure you'll miss them when you're gone, or maybe we don't always value the moments that we have. But so if you can take some time and just have some perspective on exactly that life, that's a really good thing.
That's nicely said.
I absolutely right. It does go by quickly, and you never know when it's not going to be there, or somebody's not going to be there. And my favorite thing, and it's a weird thing to say, my favorite thing, but it's nice to have Carlos back. We missed him during the draft. We joke, we kid about Carlos and his opinions and his whether he actually knows anything about sports or not. That's another topic. That's probably a different podcast, but we joke about that. But the fact is, Carlos is a kind-hearted soul, and he's smart and engaging, and he can really write. And the opinions are a different story. But I suspect that some of those qualities come from his father. And when Carlos was talking about a personal struggle, I'm not sure that's not the phrase I would use. But I'm going to say this because you put this on Facebook, Carl, so it's public. But your father died last week, and that's where you were. You were tending with your family, going through that, and it was we thought a lot about you. And Dave and I talked about it. I talked about it with a couple other people there. Just it was not the same. And you were talking about how you hadn't been there since 2005. I would suspect your pops have been pretty proud, right, that you were there all those years, year after year after year, grinding through to the point when you're not there. There are a lot of people that feel your absence, because that says something about who you are. And my guess, again, is that, that's part of who your father was. I mean, you have the same name, right? And
Winaris, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. See, there's the wit. Did your dad? I wish I'd had the chance the privilege of meeting your pop. Did he have the same wit?
Yeah, he was a smartass. He wasn't a smartass. He was more of he had my mom always said he had like a dark humor, black humor. I didn't have, I guess that's cynicism in some way, but yeah, he was kind of a jokester.
You don't have any of that, Carlos.
None of it.
Cynicism
No,
with you. No.
it's a dry wit. Mine is a dry wit that Shawn doesn't think is funny.
No, I do think it's funny as long as it's not always related to the 1980s. Yeah, I mean it's as long as it's forward thinking. No, I'm just kidding. No, but in all seriousness though, it's nice to have you back. Yeah, we know what that's like. But to Dave's point and to what you're feeling right now, Carlos, I've been through it with both my mom and my pop. Yeah, it's something to savor because you don't know. You just don't. And whether it's your kid moving off to college or having to say goodbye to a parent, it's worth picking up the phone, texting. I mean, Carlos, you probably still have a rotary phone, I would imagine, and make those kind of calls that way. But in any case, we felt your absence. We felt your absence, and we're glad you're back. And that would be my favorite thing, that you're here talking with us again.
Oh, thank you.
So, if you are in Allen Park anytime soon, I'll get you a Frosty too.
I'm lactose
with the Frosty tag that we gave him 4 years ago that he just drove home with.
It's nice that I'm lactose intolerant that you're offering that to me, Shawn. So I appreciate it.
You're not lactose intolerant. You just think you are. It's a trick. It's a trick. This
is. I hope Mike Ulrich right now, if he's listening, he just spit up his food or whatever. He was like, Shawn Windsor is telling me what I really am. That's
a trick somebody pulled on you, and because they want you to drink oat milk. I think that's all it is. No. I'll bring you a cookie.
Gas station cookie, please. Yes.
Yeah, a gas station cookie. All right. Thanks, Dave, for joining us, for taking the time. It's good to have you back, Carlos. Who do we need to thank, sir?
My son's barber.
Okay, let's thank your son's
Jack
barber.
Burkett's barber for making him look twice as good as his dad. He has the same haircut. Why don't you just use the clippers? Like, you take about 3 seconds to cut your own hair. So
it's true. We usually do, but this was communion, so kind of had to farm this one out.
Just right. Okay. Let's thank producer Robin Chan, who puts up with all his foolishness and has to do the real work that neither Shawn nor I nor Dave really do. And we have to thank executive editor Kirkland Crawford. And I guess Anjanette's also an executive editor. I've forgotten the titles now, but she's our interim editor, Anjanette Delgado. But mostly, Shawn, we have to thank the listener. And where can the listener find the podcast?
Well, we assume they've found it if they're listening to us, but we don't want to make those kind of dry wit, Carlos-esque dry wit. Is that senior or junior? Humor. But no. You find us at Spotify, Apple, wherever you find your favorite podcast. When you get there, rate us, subscribe, tell us what you think. Whether it's positive, negative, we love to hear it. Carlos especially loves hearing the negative stuff. It fuels him. It's like a I don't know, right? It's like an elf. It's like an elf. The Santa sleigh needed this Christmas carol singing. You need the trolling from and the negativity from the fans to lift your spirit. I think it's a nice metaphor there.
Yeah, Shawn's burner account usually takes care of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that you think that no reader out there could figure out on their own that you are maybe not exactly on the point here, that it's all me writing burner accounts. That's great. All right, look, until next week, right, Carlos?
Yes.
And hopefully Dave again soon because, football's really all season long with the NFL. Until then, when we are back.
Schedule release in 2 weeks.
All right, then we'll have you back. There we go. We'll talk about the schedule and where Dave's going to travel. That'd be great. All right. We will be back next week with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Thanks for listening.